What was the biggest lie you believed? Story 1. I had dumped some gasoline in an Arizona tea bottle to get a fire started. My sister saw me pour it on fire, and she freaked, thinking Arizona iced tea was flammable. I went along with it, saying, "Yeah, you didn't know that? That's why it's called Arizona, because of how hot it gets there." She was 20 years old. Around 5 years later, we are camping and she says, "Who's got some Arizona I can use to start this campfire?" I looked at her and didn't understand. She explained I told her it's flammable. I had no recollection. She says she has been telling everyone for the last 5 years how bad it is for you and how flammable it is. Story 2. As a little kid, Dad told me there was a Greek god of sex called fellatio. I'd never heard the word before. Then, freshman year of high school, I took a mythology class and asked the teacher in class why we hadn't talked about fellatio. Silence. You know, the god of sex? I'm cringing hard just typing this out. Got a nice little talk after class, and Dad almost peed his pants laughing that night. My dad was always pulling bullshit like this until he died of cancer in 2015. I was frustrated with his playful bullshittery as a kid until I was able to connect with him as a friend in my early 20s or so. He was really into wordplay and turning phrases, as well as Warhammer and World of Warcraft. I miss him, and this fellatio story always makes me smile. Story 3. When I was like 16, I found out that one of my sisters wasn't actually my sister. She was actually just best friends with my oldest sister growing up, and she lived with my family from when she was like 12 or 13 through 18. She and my oldest sister are 15 years older than me. Unfortunately, her parents wouldn't sign her over for adoption and didn't contribute anything for my mom raising her for 6 years. Weirdest part is that my family is predominantly fair-skinned, blonde with blue eyes, but the girl I thought was my sister was traditional Mexican with darker skin, dark hair, and brown eyes. My mom was always very tan and had darker hair throughout my childhood, so I thought that my other two sisters and myself were the odd ones out. Story 4. When I was very young, we had a pet hamster. He got out of his cage, so my dad put the cage in the basement, thinking he might get hungry and get back in. One morning, I woke up and there was the hamster in his cage in the usual place. I asked my mom how they found him, and she told me she opened the door to the cellar, and there he was dragging his cage back upstairs. It wasn't until I was a teenager and remembered the exchange that it occurred to me she obviously made that up. Story 5. When I was 15, over my summer break, one day my mom called and said she was gonna pick me up and we were gonna go to my stepdad's for the weekend. I didn't understand why I had to go when she would leave me at home by myself for the weekend all the time. I was old enough that I knew the rules and she could trust me. She told me there was a mix-up at the electrical company and they seemed to think we didn't pay the bill, and so the power was gonna be shut off, so we were gonna go to my stepdad's until that got sorted. That was a lie. A weekend for 2 weeks turned into a month, and then the entire summer. We hadn't been home in over 2 months. I kept asking when we could go home, and she'd always have an excuse. Now we're in September, she's driving me from one city to my hometown to register for the following year of school, which started up in a week. This was the closest I had been to home in 2 months. After I registered, we bypassed my house and started heading towards the highway to go back to my stepdad's. It was at that moment I snapped and started freaking out. I knew something was wrong. She pulled the car over and started crying. Apparently, my brother had been helping her pay the bills, and when he moved out, she could no longer afford the place on her own. So my stepdad was trying to help, but he had his own house and kids he had to look after, and he couldn't keep it up. We had been evicted. We stayed with my stepdad for the summer while my mom tried to work something out with the landlord, but they couldn't come to an agreement. Because she never told me, and in order to buy herself time to work something out, she had to be comfortable with potentially leaving everything behind. Well, she couldn't work it out with the landlord, and we lost everything. Only thing I got out of that house was the shoes on my feet and a few outfits and PJs enough for a weekend stay. Story 6. I once woke my little brother up, he was around 9 at the time, yelling that the Russians had attacked us, we are in Iceland, and rushed him down to the basement of our apartment building, and we hid under a table for a good 5 minutes. He was crying the whole time until I called April Fools. Not only has he never forgiven me, he, to this day, he is turning 40 in May, denies that ever happened. Story 7. The Tinder account was just a shared account for joking around with my friends. I never even logged in on my own. It was, in fact, his account, which he had been using during the last 3 months of our relationship. And yes, I knew how unbelievable that sounds, but I refused to believe that the man I trusted so much would ever do this to me. Story 8. My ex-husband took off with our kid and his affair partner, cut contact with me, falsely accused me of abuse to take out an emergency order against me, and tried to push through an application for sole custody with me getting occasional supervised visitation without even serving me papers first. And I still believed that it was all his girlfriend's doing, and she must have been manipulating him, because there's no way the man I'd known for 7 years would ever be that cruel. Denial is a hell of a thing. Story 9. My dad got sick of having to listen to the kids' shows I watched as a child, so he told me that the Power Rangers and Barney the Dinosaur died in the car crash with Princess Diana, so I couldn't watch them anymore. I didn't actually question it until I was quite old, embarrassingly. Story 10. That you need a license for children's parties. That was the reason why I never had a party when I was little growing up. You need to get a license from the post office, but there's only a certain amount of licenses available for that area. Story 11. Outside of dumb lies your parents tell you as kids, my friend who worked at a gas station with a big food station that had some ground beef items told me that they use kangaroo meat for their ground beef because it was cheaper than cow. I am gullible with my friends. Story 12. I lived my entire life genuinely believing my childhood home was built by little people because the attic crawl space is unbearably low. Turns out, yeah, they were a little below average height, but not literal dwarves. Just about everyone I know has laughed at me. I really am a clown. Herk. Story 13. That I was the problem in my family. In reality, I was just the scapegoat. Now I'm an adult and it's painfully clear, and I'm validated because I've learned everyone else who knows my immediate family also sees it too. I realize I was treated so badly because I was the only one who saw something wasn't right and the only one willing to point it out. Story 14. I had a fraternity brother from New York come to university in Oklahoma. This was before the internet. We told him to be careful of rattlesnakes. We explained what they were. He did not believe it. So we took him to the library, pulled the encyclopedia, and showed him. He then asked, "What else can kill you in this state?" Without missing a beat, one of our brothers said, "They probably won't kill you, but you have to watch out for drop cats." He then went on to tell him about this kind of cat, 40-pounders on average, evolved to use the cat trait of landing on their feet to kill their prey. They would climb trees, hang upside down, then drop, feet down onto their prey. Only defense? An open umbrella. This guy walked to and from every class on sunny days, not a cloud in the sky, opening his umbrella as he walked under every tree on the campus. Lasted about 3 weeks. Story 15. Therapy is only for the weak, stupid, or crazy. Real men don't show any emotion other than anger or happiness. Everyone will take advantage of you. Don't let them. Nobody is to be trusted. There were lots. Story 16. That if I do good enough, good things will happen to me. I still pity the small child who ran herself ragged trying to help everyone and destroyed her mental health because she thought that she was a bad person if she didn't dedicate every waking moment to other people. I didn't deserve that. Story 17. Friend of mine told me that soybeans picked in the daytime were used to make soy milk, and soybeans picked at nighttime were used to make soy sauce, and that was the difference between the two. I told so many people. Story 18. After my mom and dad separated, people bugged my mom to get dating again in that you're not getting any younger kind of way. So she started joking that she had an imaginary boyfriend named Bob the Alien. Bob became a staple in the house. At some point, my mom had to get a hysterectomy due to a very large and life-threatening fibroid. But my brother and I were too young to fully get what that meant, so she explained that she was carrying Bob's baby and they had to cut the baby out of her and bring it back to their home planet. My little brother and I believed it for a long time. Story 19. That it's not what is on the outside, it's what's on the inside that counts. No matter how you cut it, pretty people get better chances in life. It doesn't matter what you do if you look like Quasimodo. You can put in the most effort on a given task, they would rather swing the credit to anyone else. Story 20. Not myself, but a lie I told a friend. Back in my high school days, a few of us were walking through a train yard. There were neat piles of sand here and there. One of the group, Robert, asked what those were about. I told him they're a thing for a gang that usually operates on rail lines and yards. After they kill someone, they pour a bucket of sand where this happened. In reality, trains have sand and dump them on the tracks to help with traction. A few years later, a group of us were crossing a rail yard as a shortcut. Robert was with us, and he saw the piles of sand and got freaked out. We asked him what's up. He repeated what I told him, then told us we should split. I couldn't contain my laughter. I reminded him that I told him that, and that I made it up on the fly. He believed this for several years, and refused to go near rail yards during this time. This was also in the 90s. Story 21. Girlfriend swore to God she was on birth control. I had no reason to not believe her. One day, while running around my apartment late for work, I bumped into my bookcase, and several books crashed to the floor. I go to pick them up real quick, and my eye falls on a page that fell open, and I see the word pregnant. What's this? Apparently some diary my girlfriend had been keeping, as it was all in her handwriting. Okay, so pregnant? Better read this page real quick. And it was this whole entry about how she was worried because she was not getting pregnant after months of trying. Say what? So I put the book back, and then later on quizzed her about just what sort of birth control she was on. And of course, her answers were dodgy as fuck. Story 22. When I was in kindergarten, my family and I went on a family vacation in Myrtle Beach. I was so excited to go, and the number one thing I wanted to do while there was find sand dollars. When we got there, unknown to me, my parents asked around and found out that there actually weren't any sand dollars there. So my dad went out to a gift shop, found some sand dollars, and buried them in the sand. He had me dig in that area to find the sand dollars. I'm 24, and up until around 4 years ago, I really thought that I had found real sand dollars in the sand at Myrtle Beach. When my parents told me it was an elaborate scheme created by them, my life was forever changed. Story 23. That I won't have a calculator wherever I go. When I was in school, I used to believe that I needed to memorize all the math formulas and multiplication tables because I wouldn't have access to a calculator wherever I go. However, with the advancement of technology, I now carry a calculator with me all the time in the form of a smartphone or a smartwatch. So that belief turned out to be a big lie. Story 24. About a year into our relationship, my ex told me that she wasn't attracted to me when we started dating, but she went along with me courting her because she didn't want people to keep teasing her for being a virgin. She supposedly fell in love after a short while, but it's hard to know how much of anything she said is true after hearing that. Story 25. When I was around 5 or 6, my mother, to stop me from messing with the buttons in her car, told me that the hazard light button would blow up the car. I was understandably terrified of it until I was 13, and realized how stupid that notion was. Story 26. When I was 7, my brother told me my dad wasn't my real dad, and it was actually an Elvis impersonator from the area called Johnny. He told me not to tell my dad I know, because it would really upset him. So I spent years and years thinking the Elvis impersonator was my dad, until one night I was with my dad, and started crying saying I know everything. He was confused at first, and then called in my mom, who was equally confused. I told them my brother was the one who told me, and when they confronted him, he had completely forgotten, and had no idea it had been plaguing me for like 5 years. Story 27. This is a bit of an unpopular opinion, but when I was younger, I believed all Canadians were kind. I've noticed many are passive-aggressive and can get very disrespectful. Discrimination is still prevalent, and most are not very inclusive. Not saying people from other countries are better or worse. I feel there is a false narrative foreigners have about people from Canada. Story 28. Not the biggest lie, but still fucked up, so I'm gonna tell the story. When I was super young, my brother got a German Shepherd from my mother. We also had a Yorkie. The German Shepherd attacked the Yorkie because my dad was a shit dog owner and would just let him do whatever they wanted. My dad also lived his entire life in spite of my mom once she divorced him for being abusive. So, like a week later, the German Shepherd is gone. And then, a few years later, I cut my dad off and stopped talking to him for good, since he was so abusive to me just to hurt her. I was her favorite. My mom ended up dying, so I got stuck back with my father for a year from ages 17 to 18. During my 18th birthday, my father got super drunk, on par for him, drank all the alcohol me and my friends bought, and smoked all my weed. While he was drunk, he came up to me and my friends and said something to me. You know that German Shepherd your mom got your brother that she absolutely loved? Yeah, I took it out back and shot it. And then he did the most evil laugh I've ever heard an actual human being do. And then I found out anytime my family got rid of an animal, my psychopathic dad would just take them out back and shoot them for entertainment. On my birthday, I learned that almost every animal I ever loved was executed by my father. And there was a lot of animals he just didn't feel like taking care of and got rid of. I cut him off for a reason all those years ago. He disowned me once I moved out. I came out as bisexual, and that was just too much for him. As if I ever wanted anything to do with him in the first place. I wonder what he thinks now that his son is a woman with a boyfriend and a girlfriend and does porn, Lamau. Story 29. That America was family-oriented, cared about its citizens, and was everything I saw in movies growing up in the UK. Then I moved there. No healthcare, no guaranteed time off, bankruptcy for cancer, hatred for minority groups. I've never experienced such a culture shock. I asked for 5 weeks paid vacation when I arrived, which I got in England. I was literally laughed out of the interview. 22 years later, things have not improved. Story 30. If you work hard enough and believe in yourself, you are going to have success. More like if you have rich parents, you're going to have success. To everyone whose first comment is, "But my parents are poor and I'm a mint major and do well," I would phrase it like this. It's like playing the lottery. There is the super jackpot, and several other winning categories ranging from superb to shit. Then there are a lot of blanks. If you're poor, you will have to buy a lottery ticket, i.e. work hard, to have a chance. If you're lucky, you will land on your feet in one of the lower winning categories. If you're super lucky, you'll maybe get close to the jackpot, but never the super jackpot. If you're with the 95% of the majority, you're not lucky no matter how many tickets you buy, and everything you do does not matter. If you do have rich parents, you don't have to buy a ticket, but are automatically guaranteed to be in the jackpot category. If you buy a ticket, you have a good chance for the super jackpot. And if you're about to say, "But actually," yeah, of course you need to have parents who do give a about you. Yeah, being dumb doesn't help. Yeah, one rule or thought does not apply to everyone. Story 31. My parents would tell me to never get a credit card because they're easy to use and they will ruin your credit. They left out the part about needing lines of credit to build credit. I spent years wondering why I couldn't afford the same things as my peers without realizing they were taking credit lines. No credit is way worse than bad credit. I've had both. Story 32. I had lice when I was 6 years old, so my mom had to cut my hair really short, which made me upset. My dear older brother told me, one amongst many lies he told me as a child, that if I wanted my hair to grow out quicker, to be upside down. After a while of my face turning red, my mom walked into the living room and yelled at him for telling me lies again. Thanks, bro.